Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Midlife Revolution. I'm your host, Megan Connor, and today we are continuing coverage on the flooding in the Texas Hill Country. As many of you know, I live in San Antonio, and the Kerrville area is near and dear to my heart. So since July 4th, I have been splitting my time between going to Kerrville to help out with local relief efforts and then coming back to San Antonio to take care of my family obligations, as well as to research different news reporting that is coming around this flooding situation and aggregating that information into an understandable way for everyone out there to be able to understand how this happened and how we can prevent it in the future. So over the last couple of days, CNN and other news outlets have released some audio of 911 recordings that shed some light on the timeline for what happened on July 4th in Kerr County, Texas. And I would like to play some of that audio for you, as well as show you some things on the map so that you can see exactly what was taking place at what time. After we do that, actually, first and foremost, I always want to give out the resources for people who want to volunteer and people who have been affected by the flood. So we'll do that first, followed by the 911 calls and a timeline. Then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the non-human factors that contributed to this tragic set of circumstances. And then I'm going to give you an update on exactly what is happening with the search and rescue effort right now. I'll talk about some of the work that I was doing yesterday and some of the areas that I was in, as well as the current numbers of what's happening. After that, it's going to get a little messy around here because there are some forces at play behind the scenes that need to be exposed. And I want to expose those. But I'm going to preface this entire video and that section of the video by saying that I care more about human beings than anything else. And I don't really want to involve what some people would call politics, because there's a difference of opinions between red and blue as to how things like this should be handled and how money should be spent, et cetera, et cetera. So it is necessary during this podcast to wade into the murky waters of political spending. But I want to do it with the overarching preference that I am neither for nor against any political party. In fact, I'm registered as an independent. And the reason that I am is because I believe there are good things and bad things about both political parties. I think there are things that are wonderful and things that need to be fixed on both sides of the aisle. And so I always hope to bring balanced and fair reporting. And I will also say I've been critical of many things, many people, and many institutions. I am critical of anyone or anything, any company or any institution that stands in the way of human beings getting what they need. And I'm going to always be critical of institutions that have more money than sense. I'm going to always be critical of policies and processes that serve the institution rather than the individual. And I'm 100% always going to be critical of anything that harms children. And in this case, we are talking about children who are missing and children who are dead. Therefore, towards the end of this podcast, we are going to talk about prioritizing that idea, the idea of finding missing children and saving children from future harm, rather than focusing on the idea of which side of the aisle needs to be fixed, because let's face it, they both do. Okay, all of the political systems in our country need to be fixed, and they need to be criticized when they result in the harm of children. Thank you, Mari Brown, for this. Hero stories and devastating moments have been keeping me in tears. Lord, watch over Texas. Thank you. This has been very emotional for me as well. As I just have some ties to the area, it's a place that is near to my heart, and you can't be there and note the devastation and see what all of these people have been through without being emotionally affected by it. And I definitely have been. McSpunky, I'm glad you're here to inject a little testosterone into the chat. That unfortunately these days, all there is a little sad. Well, I think I have to be real about the fact that the majority of my audience is female, and there's no secret about that. And it's probably just because, I'm a female myself, in case you haven't noticed, and I do tend to talk a lot about this particular stage of life for women and relationships from the women's perspective. But that is by no means to discourage men from consuming my podcast, and especially Mixed Monkey, you're one of my favorites. So okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and start out with listening to these 911 calls. Now, I want to thank CNN for publishing these, but we're going to start out, of course, with how you can help. And it is the same kind of links that I have shared before. If you're interested in volunteering, tcr.communityos.org. Although I do have to say, I registered on July 5th on that, put a profile up, and started requesting jobs. And I just now got an email back earlier today for the first opportunity for me to help. So I'm going to be looking into that, because it's an opportunity to help organize community resources and to unite people asking for help with people giving help. And that's something I think I can do a lot of good work for. So I'm going to check into that a little later today. And then if you're interested in donating, communityfoundation.net is the website that was put up by Kerr County, and it benefits the 5 counties who are most affected by this tragedy. Thanks for being here and modding. Angel thinks she's the boss. I appreciate that. China Clay, it's always good to see you. You are a favorite, as well as Texas Roadrunner, MB, Aaron, good to see you. Mari, good to see you. Hawkeyes, thanks for being here in the chat. And thanks for caring about South Texas. Danny Hull, good to see you. Susan Davis, always good to see you. I can't always say hello to everyone, but sometimes I can. Joe Schmo, here for all the tea. Bring it, Megan. I'm not even from Texas, and it tears me up to think of all the lives lost and families still without closure. It is really difficult. Hey, Tim, it's great to see you as well. Hope you're doing well. So as always, these are the ways that you can help. The Community Foundation is accepting cash donations. That is the best way that you can help the people in harm's way right now. Oh, okay, Mary, sorry about that. They are overwhelmed with in-kind donations, meaning things like water and clothing and food donations, etc., diapers, baby wipes. Believe me, they have more than enough of those things. What they're looking for now is cash donations. I have been sending HEB gift cards to the Southern Oaks Baptist Church with all of the donations that you guys have been giving. So all of the super chats on these flood updates, as well as anyone sending me Venmos, which my Venmo is at @3rd_verse, just like all of my social media is. And you can send Venmos there to be donated to gift cards. I am posting the receipts on my Patreon so that people know there's transparency there. And really grateful for all of you donating to that. We've given over $1,000 in HEB gift cards to the Southern Oaks Baptist Church, and that goes directly into the hands of the people who are coming to the church asking for help and saying, this is all great, but there's stuff that I need that you don't have here. And they give them an HEB gift card and say, go and get what you need. So that is the best way to support the community right now, that communityfoundation.net, or by helping us give gift cards. There is still a burn ban in effect in Kerr County. That's because the fires, the heat from the fires, interferes with their drones and with their detecting equipment that they're using out there, which we're going to talk a little bit about later. So that's how you can help. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is these 911 calls and the timeline. So again, I want to thank CNN for publishing these calls so that we can get a better idea of exactly what was going on.
We begin tonight with breaking
news. Pardon me 1 second. I need to put headphones on. I forgot.
Could shed light on what happened almost a week ago as one of the worst natural disasters in recent memory began to unfold. Dispatch audio from Central Texas about a half hour before the first emergency warning was issued for the hardest hit county. along the Guadalupe River. Now, the first call we have is from a firefighter at 3:37 a.m. local time. The calmness of his voice is remarkable, all things considered.
Yes, ma'am. Just for your 43, the Guadalupe is starting to come up, and Shoemaker is no longer passable at this time.
That's the Guadalupe River rising.
Okay, and I want to show you where Shoemaker passes, because if you try to look it up on the map, you're probably not going to be able to find it. But there is a historical marker there, and that is the reason why I was able to find this for you. And I wanted to show you this is along Texas 39 here. And I want you to see what Shoemaker Pass used to be. Look down at this little road over here. This is what Shoemaker Pass used to be. You can see it's a small one-lane road. It's a little crumbly, and it's pretty down close to the water. Well, look at the current Texas 39. There is a reason there are no guardrails here. There are these little stones along each side of this road so that when the water comes up over the road, not if, but when it comes up over the road, it can just wash over, and you can see by the stones how fast the water is moving and how high the water is. So if we travel down this just a little bit and then look back at the river, you know, it's pretty high up off the river, probably a good 10 feet over the water. But this sheriff was reporting, or sheriff's deputy was reporting, that the water was up over the road on this, what they call Shoemaker Pass right here on Texas 39. Now, if we go back to the regular map, you guys are used to seeing the map that I always put up here whenever we're talking about this, where you can see Hunt, Texas here. And this is the North Fork of the Guadalupe River, the South Fork of the Guadalupe River, and that cutoff is right here. That Shoemaker's Pass, where you can see that old road is not really passable. People don't use that one anymore. So I just want you to see what we're talking about. So at the time of this phone call, this first 911 call, they say this is the first one that they received, and it was somewhere around 3 o'clock in the morning that this part of the road right here was already flooded. And as I showed you in the last live that I did, if you're living in this area and you're trying to get to higher ground, you can't go this way anymore after 3:30 in the morning. And we're going to hear very shortly about how just after that, right down here on this south part of 39, this road gets cut off as well, which means that all the people along this part of the Guadalupe River would have been trapped and couldn't get to higher ground at that point. So we're talking from here all the way to here. And let's just go down and look at what the river looks like over here. I drove past this part of the river the other day, and this is where the river comes up really close to the freeway, or the highway, I should say, and the water does come up over the road, and it gets all the way up to this step right here, as I saw on a social media post. So it's a really scary situation, obviously. Now let's go back to finish the rest of these 911 calls here.
In one of the main streets flooded, and from that point on, as the audio shows, problems were growing fast.
Respond to 2029, Highway 39, 2029, Highway 39. It's going to be for a water rescue. Have callers, house flooded. We're getting multiple calls off of 39.
Okay, so again, I want to go to the map and show you where this is, because oopsie, I didn't mean to drop a pin all the way over there. I just wanted that to go away. So again, this is the cutoff where we had that first phone call, and this down here on 2029, very close to this river crossing that we just looked at, their house was flooded. So let's take a look at the street view there. And we can see this little house right here. So if there was water already coming into this little house, by the time they got there, the people were on the roof because just over these trees is where the river is. And then if we look across the road, there's this lovely pasture. But again, if the water is coming up to the top of this house, it's going to be over the road in no time. And that was, again, around 3:30 in the morning.
People are stating their houses are flooding. We're trying to advise them to get to higher area.
Now, the next piece of audio is of what we reported on last night, a firefighter requesting an emergency alert be issued to the community and the dispatcher not able to make that call.
Is there any way we can send a code red out to our Hunt residents asking them to find higher ground or stay home?
10-4 standby. We have to get that approved with our supervisor.
Okay, so this is confirming kind of the worst of what we thought, is that a sheriff's deputy, a volunteer fire department individual asked for that warning to be sent out to the county. And the dispatcher advises him, yes, but we have to get it approved through our supervisor. And we know that it was about 90 minutes before that actually happened.
Well, as we reported last night, it would be 90 minutes from that call to when Kerrville's mayor told the Texas Tribune that he finally received a code red alert. Now, during that time, the Guadalupe River would overflow in a wall of water several stories high at its peak, and the 911 calls would just keep coming.
We received a phone call at our fire station to have a lady. She's frantic. She's at Casa Bonita, 117 Corto Way or Casa Bonita Lodges, and she said her children are on top of one of the cabanas and they're trapped.
Well, the area is.
So again, I want to show you, we'll go over there to Casa Bonita. I had it pulled up here. It is this one right here. So that's just a short ways away from the house that we looked at as well. And we'll go down there to look at the street view there. If I can get my stuff together here. Sorry, guys. So this is Casa Bonita. It's a little collection of cabins, and just past this cabin right here is the river. And so that lady was calling to say that her kids were trapped on the top of one of these. Now there are some on this side, and then there are also some on this side over here. So we don't know exactly which one, of course, but we do know that the river is very close by here. Zooming back out. Get rid of this real quick. And then you can see these little cabins all up and down here, and the river is right here. So I don't know if we have street view right there. You see where we do have it. I don't think we can go in there because it's gated, right? But anyway, just going back out to look at where we are here with the Guadalupe River, the South Fork of the Guadalupe right there, and not too far away from some of these little cabins right here. So now I want to look at the timeline of what we know happened before all of this rain even started. What was the National Weather Service doing? So July 2nd, Wednesday, the Texas Division of Emergency Management activates resources for an increased risk of flooding. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that the Texas Division of Emergency Management would be alerting the emergency services in the area that there's an increased risk of flooding. They would be letting all of the standby people and on-call people know that there's an increased risk of flooding. Everyone's asking Sylvia Ingram, why are you unsubscribing? Well, I mean, obviously she doesn't like something that I said. Look, I'm going to say some things tonight that are going to piss some people off. I'm just going to say that right now. Because there are some people who are more interested in clinging to their political ideals than they are to having those ideals challenged. I'm not going to say anything derogatory about any one political party or any one political ideal, except where those political ideals are prioritized over the ideals of helping human beings and saving human lives. So that's all. Again, I'm a registered independent. I don't have an affiliation with Democrats or Republicans. I don't have an opinion either way about which party is better, because I think they both need reform. And I'm going to be critical of any of the individuals in any party that make choices that deprioritize human beings. So that's all. Anyway, yes, I'm going to go to Lori's sentencing, but that feels like a million miles away. Hey, Duty Ron, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for your support. And thank you so much for your generous donation that went directly to first responders for supplies for them. And I'm super, super grateful for that. I really appreciate it so much. And you're I love your podcast, and I think you're a great voice out there in this wonderful space. I'm grateful for you and your broadcasting as well. So let's go over what happened. So we were talking about the increased risk of flooding. So Texas Division of Emergency Management, now that is, again, a local agency. It is not a national agency. It's a locally funded local agency. They would have been alerting everyone that there was a risk of flooding. That was on July 2nd. Then on July 3rd, that was Thursday, the day before the 4th of July, obviously, the National Weather Service brought in extra staff to monitor for flooding. Sorry for the dog noises, guys. So the National Weather Service overstaffed to monitor for flooding, and they did issue a flood watch. Now, what's the difference between a flood watch and a flood warning? A flood watch says that it's very likely that there is going to be flooding in the area. You should expect flooding in the area. When it increases from a watch to a warning, the warning means it is happening right now. You need to heed all of the warnings and take caution, take precautions. So on Thursday, July 3rd, the National Weather Service did two things. They brought in extra staff to monitor the flooding, and they issued a flood watch. Then on July 4th at 1:14 a.m., because they had extra staff and they were monitoring the situation, the National Weather Service issued an emergency alert for Kerr County. That means that there is an emergency alert on the books at 1:14 a.m. Now, that would have been your cell phone going off in the middle of the night saying there's an emergency alert. Now, we've talked before about the fact that cell coverage, particularly in western Kerr County, where Hunt and Ingram are located, the cell coverage is not that great, especially down in those lower lying areas, which would have been on the riverfront. So it's possible that some people did not receive that emergency alert. In addition, some people have those emergency alerts turned off on their phone. In addition, some people have a cell phone number that is different than the area code that they live in. And so some of the phones are programmed to only give you alerts for the area that you live in or the area that's associated with your area code. Now, you can change those settings. Most of you can on some of your phones, but not everybody knows how to do that readily. So I believe those are some of the reasons that people may not have received those emergency alerts from the National Weather Service. They issued one at 1:14 a.m. they issued one at 3:35 a.m. Now, around 3:30 is the time that these 911 calls came in that we just heard, but the call from the volunteer fire department asking for a code red to be issued didn't come in until 3:37, and we know by that time people's houses were already flooded at that time, especially in Hunt and in Ingram. Now, a code red, as I've covered before, Code Red is an app that you can download on your phone. And the people in these localities would have been told over and over by the sheriff's department and by the mayor and by local officials to download the Code Red app and to have it open and functional so that people would be able to get those emergency alerts from the local area. And the Code Red app is, it's uniquely set for different kinds of emergencies, and you can go in there and play with the settings on it. It is meant to get signals through to people who don't have those National Weather Service emergency alerts loaded up on their phone and ready to go. So you can sign up to have a Code Red alert even if you're not in the zip code. For example, if you have children scattered all over the country like I do, you could sign up for the Code Reds in their areas so that you know if they are in danger, etc. So what other officials have noted is that by 3:37, when this volunteer fire department requested the Code Red, it would have been too late for Hunt and for Ingram, who were already flooded. At that point, the 911 dispatchers were telling them to just get to higher ground because they were not able to do anything. I also want to note that between 1:14 a.m. and 3:37 a.m., when this Code Red was asked for, those sheriff's deputies were out rescuing people. And there were people doing swift water rescues at this time. They were doing their very best to get to people that they could get to at this time. There were a lot of people they could not get to at this time. Then finally, at 4:03 a.m., there was an emergency alert sent out urging people to move to higher ground now, and that the situation was extremely dangerous and life-threatening. And that would have been something that would have come over the cell phone with those loud, annoying sirens that we all get annoyed with whenever we hear an amber alert or a silver alert or a clear alert or a flood alert. So a lot of people turn those things off or they ignore them. But at this time of the morning, the water was already rising. Many people had already been washed away. And then the mayor said that he didn't receive his emergency Code Red until around 5 a.m. So that was about 90 minutes after it was requested. Now, you heard that 911 dispatcher say, we have to get approval from a supervisor. So by the time they got approval from the supervisor and actually issued it, it took 90 minutes to get that done. And the reason why that didn't work and it was too late for so many people is because the water rose 25 feet over the course of 90 minutes. It was just too late for so many people. Finally, at 4:35 a.m., Kerr County reported flooding at the low water crossings, and this would have been in Kerrville proper. And this was just right before that wall of water came down. So then at 5:34 a.m., there was a flash flood emergency declared for the Guadalupe River area. And so again, even though we still don't have all the answers of what was happening between 1:14 a.m. and 5:34 a.m., we have a few more answers now. And I just always want to keep you up to date on what I do know. And now I want to consider some of the other factors, the non-human factors. And you can see I've got a fourth bullet point that I didn't even fill out here because I wanted to get this out to you guys as quickly as I can. And maybe you can, give me some ideas as well. Some of the non-human factors that contributed to the loss of life here. First of all, it's the 4th of July holiday. There were people in RVs down near the river, in the park in Kerrville, camping along the river that never would have been there if it hadn't been the 4th of July. And I think that's probably where we're going to find that a lot of people have gone missing, is in these tent campers that were up and down the river, and also the RV campers, especially those that were very, very close to the river. And as many of you pointed out, and as I've actually been boots on the ground visiting down there, I was astonished at the number of RV parks that have popped up along the river in the last 3 to 4 years, very close to the water, probably not considering floodplains. All of them would have had to have a flood emergency plan. But again, all of this sort of revolves around the fact that they're going to be aware when the water starts to rise. And that's the second point that I have here, is that this started happening in the middle of the night. If it had happened during the day when everybody was out partying, looking at the river, they would have seen the water coming up and they could have gotten to higher ground more quickly. But as it was, 99% of the people were asleep. Some of the victims who were able to escape said that they were awoken by the sounds of pipes breaking in their house as the house left its foundation. Some people were awakened by the sounds of trees snapping in half as the water came down. Some people were awakened by the sound of the water rushing coming down. And even for a lot of those people, it was too late for them to avoid the flood completely, but some of them were able to escape their homes in time. And miraculously, some people, I even read a story today of one family who was in their RV. It got washed away, and after 20 minutes of going down the river, they eventually got stuck in a wooded area and they were able to escape their RV. Many people were not so lucky. I saw the wreckage of many, many RVs and many cars stuck in the trees high up, 10, 20 feet up. It was just absolutely astounding to see the number of people or vehicles, I should say, that were stuck in the debris so high up. Thank you so much, Mixed Monkey, for gifting memberships. I appreciate you so much. I will be doing probably a couple of other members-only lives this week. As I'm down there in the Kerrville area, I can't really change the settings very well on my live streams. And whenever I go without changing settings, I always end up with weird, random chatters in my live, and I don't want that. So I'll go live members only. That way, members only see it first, and then I turn it to public a little bit later. So the other factor that is a non-human factor that contributed to the loss of life here was that the storm system that was coming down from the north stalled over the headwaters of the Guadalupe River around San Angelo. In addition, there was a storm system coming up from the Gulf of Mexico that was also very slow moving. And both of these low pressure systems basically just stalled and got stuck right over the top of the headwaters as well as this Kerr County area. And so the National Weather Service, while they were monitoring things really well, I believe the reason they issued that first warning at 1 o'clock in the morning was because they noticed that the storm system had stalled and was not moving on and was dumping a lot of rain a lot faster than they originally predicted. So again, if this had been during the day when people could see the water rising or when they could observe the fact that the rain was still coming down and the storm wasn't moving on, then it's very possible that the loss of life could have been a lot less. So when it comes to a disaster like this, and really any kind of disaster that involves any human decision making, at some point there's going to be finger pointing and there's going to be blaming, and there are going to be people who are grieving and they are so angry at the loss of life that they want to start pointing fingers and blaming somebody because they can't understand and they can't fathom losing their loved ones. And I completely understand the desire to do that. However, I always want to take into consideration the fact that there are non-human factors contributing to this situation and almost every situation that both made the situation worse and also could not be helped. If we were going to create a worst case scenario for the Guadalupe River area, this would be it. The 4th of July, where there's the maximum amount of people there, the middle of the night so that nobody knows it's coming, and a storm system that just got stalled over that entire area. That would have been the worst case scenario. You can't make this stuff up. You can't write about it. This is just something that nobody thought all of these factors coming together were going to happen at the same time. That being said, I do think that there are some things that could have been done to prevent all of this, and we will talk about that here very shortly. I want to talk about where we stand right now. As of this moment, the death toll has climbed to 120 over the entire 5-county area. There are still over 160 people missing. And having been there myself several times over the last few weeks and looking at the destruction and looking at the huge gargantuan task that search and rescue has in front of it, this is going to be going on for a while. Unofficial reports say that search and rescue has covered approximately 16 miles of the river, and that took a week. There are at least another 10 miles of river to go in the area that was most affected. However, I also want to point out, I'm going to go back to my favorite thing, the map here. And I want to zoom out. Actually, I had a better map up here at one point. Now I can't remember where it is. But nevertheless, we're just going to cancel all of this out over here. And I'm going to zoom out. Well, this is all. I really don't want this on here. I don't want all of the street view. I just want to be able to show you. Well, let me just do this for a second. Give me 1 second, guys. I want to find you the best possible view here so you can understand. Here it is. Okay. All right, so this is a map of the Guadalupe River. As you can see, it is not just the Kerr County area, which is right here. It goes all the way down to Canyon Lake, which is just north of San Antonio, and then it goes all the way out to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, if we zoom in just a little bit, from the North Fork of the Guadalupe River and the South Fork over here, from this point to Kerrville is about 16 miles. The point from where the forks combine to Canyon Lake is around 100 miles. Now, the force of that water caused Canyon Lake to rise by 20 feet. Oh, shoot, you can't see it. Dang it. That's because I stopped sharing. I didn't do it on purpose, but I did. Let me go over here again. It says that it's sharing with you, but I took it out. I took it out of the right layout, so that's my fault. My fault. Okay, here we go. So the North and South Fork of the Guadalupe River, and this is where Hunt and Ingram are right here. From there to Kerrville is about 16 miles. From Kerrville to Canyon Lake is about 100 miles. And because of the force of this water, the level at Canyon Lake rose 20 feet. Now there's a dam right here on the south side of Canyon Lake that they only let out a certain amount of water at a time. So these all of these places downstream or downriver on the Guadalupe, they did not flood because number one, the dam is there. And number two, Canyon Lake has been at historically low levels for a really long time because of all the drought. And so the level at the lake rose 20 feet, but it didn't even get it back to pre-drought levels. But if you can imagine this massive lake going up by 20 feet over the entire surface of the whole lake, that's a lot. So the reason I wanted to share this with you is because search and rescue has only covered the first 16 miles of the river. And there are at least 10 more miles to go where there's significant enough damage that they think it's possible that they might find human remains there. I read an article the other day that said for people to not lose hope because sometimes, individuals can be found 5 or 6 days after an event like this happens. However, that's considering a lot of very positive factors. And I think considering the force of the water, I think it's very unlikely that we're going to find any survivors at this point. However, it's not my call to make. That's just my opinion. And the officials have not changed this yet to recovery. It is still considered a search and rescue situation. So I hope that helps to give you a little bit of an understanding what search and rescue is facing at this point. Once you leave Kerrville, look at how much this river just like winds and bends. There's just so much to cover. It just seems really overwhelming. So it just always leaves me a little bit speechless to think about how much is left to do. I want to dispel a couple of myths at this point. There were a couple of people who have said, these huge debris piles and everything, and it's not likely that they're going to be able to comb through the debris. Well, I want to tell you, I saw firsthand yesterday how these search and rescue individuals get through these debris piles, and they are going through every single pile. They are not passing them by. And they do it very systematically to make sure that nothing gets duplicated, no efforts get duplicated. And mainly what they're doing is on the first pass, those canine teams are going through with cadaver dogs to try and find remains, followed by a team of search and rescue individuals, boots on the ground, people literally walking the riverbank with the probing sticks that they're able to go get into those debris piles and probe for different things. There is also a group of people on horseback who are able to cover more ground in a shorter amount of time. And there are lots of different ways that they are searching for search and rescue. I'll just put it that way. So they're making sure that they search every single one of those debris piles. So anybody telling you, oh, there could just be bodies in the debris and they're never going to be found. First of all, that's not true. They methodically go through and search those piles. And then following that, crews come through and dismantle the entire debris pile. Now they do it very carefully and very methodically to make sure that they don't disturb anything that's been missed. But they start systematically taking things off the debris pile before they just start dismantling everything. And I witnessed firsthand, I was helping in this neighborhood that was very close to the water for about 6 hours yesterday. And over the course of that time, about 5 of those huge debris piles got completely dismantled and sorted into burnable and not burnable materials. And a lot of that debris got cleared and went away. So these teams are working very fast. There are literally thousands of volunteers. Over 2,100 first responders have been sent to the area. And in addition, they've counted since the 4th of July over 12,000 people like me who are just volunteering and showing up to help out with various tasks. So it's a huge group of people that is working together to try and get this gargantuan task done. And I just want to play this video for you now where we can see a specialized group and what they're doing to go and locate victims of the flood.
The search for victims here in Kerr County has reached a dire point.
See if we can get like 30 feet in and get about right here. I want to be where you're at right now. I can try here real quick.
With more than 170 people still missing, the search for victims of the devastating flood in Kerr County has entered a critical and desperate phase.
And I wanted to get a clear view of the rest of the concrete wall that's cleared. That way I could see if it was marking anything else, but it's only marking that single spot.
The Gulf Search and Rescue Team is the only crew using artificial intelligence to scan beneath the surface, searching for signs that could indicate the presence of human remains.
So these first scans, these are the last scans on this left side. Yes, yeah. So you can see it marking off this wall right here.
So it marks on that better than it does when there's debris there.
Yes, sir, because that sonar is able to get straight to it instead of go. That's why I was saying if there's something in debris, it's going to be harder to
see it.
Yes, sir.
Unless it's in front of the debris.
Yes, sir, exactly.
So if a human's against the concrete, say held there by current, it'll still show the human and not just the concrete like bowing out like it might be broke or something?
Here, I'll show you. Look.
Search teams like Gulf are zeroing in on the towering debris piles, believed to be concealing the bodies of those still unaccounted for.
So we got approved to come and search this dam, and we wanted to scan it with sonar. And the sonar that we're using it's called the Aqua. It's an handheld active sonar device that uses AI targeting technology to help find and recover victims of drownings.
Again, I just want to say thank you to Scripps News for letting us play this clip under fair use policy. I think this is important information for people to understand the many different methods people are using to find victims.
When it's scanning, what it'll do is it'll send a sonar cone out. It'll come back, the AI interprets it and lets you know if there's a possibility of a body or if there is a body. Yes, sir. Right off that dam, you have like that white log. Okay.
Cody Gould is 26.
Right at that.
And the only person here operating this AI-driven sonar technology to help bring the missing home.
So I was scanning, didn't get any possibilities, didn't get any hits on anything, except when we got to the south side of the dam. I say we searched. I kept hitting on one spot. It was telling me it's a possibility. It wasn't telling me it was absolutely certain, but it was letting me know that, hey, this is concerning. This could be something. Don't just disregard it, essentially is what it was telling me when I was reading the scans. So I hit on it 10 or 15 times, and we got divers out here just to check because we don't want to leave any stones unturned.
Despite the dangerous undercurrents, scuba divers from the Austin Police Department geared up and volunteered to make the risky descent into the floodwaters.
Put you on the rocks over here, or people really don't really understand the gravity of the situation. I think 2 days ago when we got done with our searching, the number was at 60, and then yesterday went up to 161, 162. I've never been on anything this bad. Like, I've searched for bodies and stuff, but nothing like this. I don't feel like there's really any words to describe of how it feels to know that many people and that many families possibly don't have their loved ones at home with them.
There's a storm rolling in, and conditions on the river are getting worse. And so the incident command here in Kerrville has called an all call, which means all search and rescue crews have to get off the river. So the Gulf Search and Rescue Team are going to have to leave this for now, and they're just not sure if there's a body down there or not. The divers were only able to go down 3 feet, and the AI sonar reading was showing that the mass was down at 6 feet. And the current is so bad underneath that there very well could be a body under there. And these guys are going to have to walk away right now not knowing. And I know how tough that is for them. This is Michael Anthony Adams, Scripps News Group, Kerrville, Texas.
Again, my thanks to Scripps for letting us play that clip. It is definitely hard to watch, knowing that this is where we are in the process where, you know, when the flood waters first went back down, there were vehicles sitting next to the riverbed that had human remains in it that people were able to find. Obviously, there were human remains in some of the debris piles that were a little bit easier to locate. Now we're at the point where a lot of these human remains are going to be underwater and possibly stuck or buried mud and other debris, and it's going to be incredibly difficult to recover. So this is going to be a long process that we have ahead of us. And again, we've discussed before how we believe, a lot of us who have discussed it believe, that 165 is probably a lot lower than the actual number of missing people. And that's for a number of different reasons, but one of them is because in many situations, entire families were washed away. I read an article today about a family who were washed away in an RV, and it was a woman and her boyfriend, as well as his step parents, or his father and stepmother, and two of his young siblings. Now, mercifully, those two children were rescued alive, but all four of the adults in that family were swept away and unfortunately did not survive. And the heartbreaking thing about that is that there's nobody left to report them missing. Those children could have been rescued under difficult conditions. They may have some kind of temporary trauma that they're dealing with and unable to talk about their family or the situation. So I believe the number of missing to be much higher than that. However, I also believe it's unlikely that a lot of these people will ever be found, unfortunately, because of the massive amount of water that was involved in the force of the water and the speed at which it was traveling. So my heart goes out to all those families, especially who are missing people. Of course, those who have lost people, of course, those who have lost homes and businesses, but especially to the families who are missing people that may just never be recovered. As someone who's lost many family members in the past, I can attest to how devastating that is. Thanks, Duty Ron, for becoming a member. And yes, Kresha, thank you for this. I have seen drones in the area, although some of those may have been reconnaissance drones prior to President Trump's visit yesterday, which I'll also talk about a little bit. And thank you so much for being here, Kresha. I always appreciate your support. I want to move now to another of the difficulties when these sorts of disasters arrive, and I've talked about this before, is people using the disasters to scam victims or just plain bad behavior during disaster situations. And this article or this video actually caught my eye because this is the set of houses that I was working on yesterday. And this was one of the homeowners that I spoke to briefly when I first arrived on the scene. This yellow and green house is kind of unmistakable. And it's interesting because you can see, this is the house I was working on, the house here on the left. And, oh, I'm not sharing again. Lovely. There we go. At least I caught it this time. The house on the left was the one I was working on here. And then there was this house, which obviously is not going to be able to be repaired. The floor has literally dropped out of the bottom of this house. And then another house over on this side, just to the right of this roof that you see over here, is just a blank foundation. That house got completely washed away, and I'll show you the pictures from the front side of that in just a minute as I was taking pictures around the area. But these houses were not this close together. There was at least 6 feet of difference between these two houses. I believe that this room right here is supposed to be over here. So we'll hear the owner talk about that in just a second. This comes from News 4, which is a local San Antonio station.
It's been almost a week since the flooding disaster. Survivors, many of them are still in shock.
News 4 San Antonio's Karina Hollingsworth continues our team coverage tonight. She joins us live from a home on Waterfront Drive that was ripped apart. Karina?
Mandy, Jonathan, the owner of this home behind me told me he was not home during the night of the flood. He said he actually thought his neighbor was joking when he called to tell him that his home was underwater. But sadly, he wasn't. And he told me that nothing could have ever prepared him for what he saw when he got home.
What the hell am I going to do? You know, I'm 75 years old. Lost my wife.
Hallman's wife died 8 months ago. He fears she wouldn't have survived the flood if she was home. The house, flooded with over 5 feet of water, currently has no floors and is filled with mud.
Our insurance company 2 months ago canceled all our flood insurance with no warning. They just sent letters out, we're not covering flood anymore. So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Hallman feels the world is caging in on him and his neighbors as they try to pick up what's left of their homes. They've had to face an issue they never imagined: looting.
All our tools of that house, this house, somebody came through and stole all of it. That's our world. That's our world. There is no empathy for anybody.
With tears.
So I just want to say I spoke with this ma'am just very briefly as I came up into the neighborhood yesterday, and he's still pretty devastated and angry, understandably so. He and his neighbors were sitting out there just talking and sharing stories of the flood. And I came up to ask them if they knew the owner of the home that I was going to work on, because that's where I was assigned. And they told me where I could locate him, but I couldn't find him right away. So I went ahead on into the house to sort of assess the damage and see what was going on there. And I want to share with you what I found when I first walked in. If I can find the video, which of course I always think I have these things pulled up and ready to go, and sometimes I do. Here we go, I think. Nope, those are static pictures. Thanks for your patience, you guys. I appreciate you. Here we go. Okay. It's a little tougher to share videos this way, but I think it's better than the way I was trying to do it yesterday. Or maybe it's not. Okay, this is not the correct video, but this is the area right behind the house. So we were right on the river. The Kerrville Bridge was right there. Just to the right of the bridge was a little inlet, and that's what we're seeing right now. It's kind of a ditch that comes off the river, and it was completely flooded all the way up to the top of the trees there. I'm going to turn off the sound. So you can see workers, just lots and lots of workers down here, little excavators, and people removing debris and limbs. But it's just amazing to look, down over there to the river to see how far away from the river we are. And the water came up 4 feet into the houses that were up here. I'm going to show you one more video real quick that is going to show you some of the same type of perspective. And just forgive me at the beginning there, I was trying to find a good angle, and maybe I can fast forward a little bit through this part until I get my stuff together. In the flood zone, and I wanted to show you just how awful this flood was. I'm standing next to a giant pile of trees and debris. I'm standing right next to the river, and behind me is the bridge that goes over the Guadalupe River on Highway 27. Okay, so I didn't really pause long enough because I was trying to record this quickly and get back to work, but behind me you can see the bridge that goes over Highway 27, or it goes over the river on Highway 27. That bridge is 25 feet high, and the water went all the way up to the top of that bridge. Rosie B, yes, you absolutely can. You can send Home Depot or Lowe's gift cards. I would recommend that you send those to the Southern Oaks Baptist Church. They have a great program in place for handing those gift cards out to the people who need them, and you can just find it by Googling Southern Oaks Baptist in Kerrville. You can also send Amazon packages there, but I would only send them if you're going to send things for first responders. They have plenty of stuff for the survivors. What they're looking for now is sunscreen, bug spray, duct tape, and work gloves for the first responders. They go through those things very, very quickly here in Kerrville. And what I want you to understand is that the water was all the way up to the bottom of that bridge. So where I'm standing right now was under at least 20 feet of water. And you can see behind me the river and all of those trees that have just been flattened by the water. And I don't know how well you can see the bridge behind me, so I can't really zoom in on it, but it's just devastating to think about. I'm taking a break. I've been up in this group of houses right here, these 3 houses, helping them clean out all of the mud and debris that was deposited by the flood. And as you can see, you know, this is kind of where the sidewalk ends. You can't go any further yet because the debris is still there. We've got a ton of crews over here working in the ditch. There's like a little stream outlet up there, and you can see how high up these houses are from off the water, but they all had 3 or 4 feet of water in them. So you can see how tall that bridge is, and the water was all the way up to the top of that bridge. And it's definitely more water than they have seen here ever. So I'm going to get back to work, but I just wanted you to be able to have an idea of just how bad this flood was. These houses are well off the water. They're not in the 100-year floodplain at all. And the 100-year floodplain ends at that fence, if you can see the fence that's lying on the ground with debris stuck in it. And there are a bunch of news crews over here because we're expecting the president to come across this bridge here in just a little while. But it's incredible to think about the volume of water that came through here. And hopefully we'll have some more stories for you from the people who live in this area very soon. Okay, so there's that. I want to show you a couple more little videos from the work that I was doing that day. If I can get my technology to do what I want it to do. I'm not sure why I can't share this particular video. This is the one that I'm looking for. Okay. Thanks for being patient with me, you guys. You know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here. And select it and airdrop it and see if that works. In the meantime, ugh, I don't want to save that, sorry. In the meantime, I want to share with you some of the pictures, the still pictures that I took I have this silly look on my face. Okay, I'm taking these out. I've got, okay. One more time trying this here. Okay, well, for some reason, it's saying that it's not eligible for sharing. I'm not really sure why, so I apologize, guys. Let me see if I can share these with you. Technology on the fly is not my forte. I like to have things like all ready to go, but it doesn't always go as planned, which means now I'm going to have to go back and edit all of this out. Nope, can't share it that way either. Well, I guess I'll have to put together another little video where I share with you some of the other pictures and videos that I took while I was there working on the house. I was astounded by what I saw when I went into the house and saw how much mud was in there. And it was just absolutely amazing from, and not in a good way. It was amazing from the standpoint that I could not believe how much mud stayed in the house. And I've talked about it before, flood mud is different than regular mud because it's got all kinds of debris and gross things in it. And for a little while, that smell stayed with me. And every time I go to clean off my shoes or something, and I see that flood mud in there, I can smell it. Anyway, now that you kind of have an understanding of where we are with the recovery effort, I want to talk about one last point. It's going to take me a while to get through it, through all of it, but I think it's really important for us to talk about. Joe Schmo and I have both on our channel, we've talked about why there was not some kind of a better warning system installed that could have helped save some lives. We have both tried to ask the difficult question of how could this have been prevented, or how could the loss of life been mitigated at the very least. Now, initially, when that question got asked of the sheriff and the mayor, they sort of deflected it by saying, look, now is the time for us to focus on search and recovery, search and rescue. Now is the time for us to get answers to families. They're giving death notifications every day. I completely understand that point of view. And I understand wanting to wait to get those answers until we're further along in the recovery process. My personal belief is that we're there now at this point. They haven't found anyone alive since Friday, July 4th. They are still finding remains as late as yesterday afternoon. And so I'm glad that the recovery efforts are still continuing. And I think it is really important. While we're doing that, however, enough questions have arisen that it's time to start addressing them. And what is going to frustrate me is as we go through this timeline, we're going to see that there were multiple points at which a preventable or a system could have been put in place to make the loss of life preventable, or at least mitigated, so that there would have been less loss of life. So I'm going to share an article with you that I came across in my research today that frustrated me very much when I started to dig into it. First, I just want you to see there are so many times when I'm going through this area and I see something like this and I'm just absolutely astounded. This is where you see the tiny people in the background. This is a place where the Guadalupe River curves around this very tall bridge from where you get from I-10 on the east over into Comfort and Center Point and Kerrville on the west side. This tree was underneath, obviously, this gigantic bridge, but you can see the river. As the river curves around this way, obviously the floodwaters came all the way over here, and this tree got stuck around. One of the other things that astounded me as I was walking around down there near the river, I kept seeing these big holes with sticks just sticking out of them. And I kept thinking, what in the world caused that hole? Well, when I got closer, I realized those sticks were actually roots from the trees, and the giant hole was where the tree used to stand. So we're talking about massive cypress trees. Most of these are cypress trees that have been just completely uprooted and carried away by the destructive waters of this flood. It's absolutely astounding the force that this water has had. It's also amazing to see the trees that are still standing. That's just amazing to me too. But take a look at this title. Did fiscal conservatism block plans for a new flood warning system in Kerr County? Now, again, I gave a little bit of a warning at the beginning of this. I am not going to be critical of any one particular political party over another, except to say that when we fight with each other over politics, people's lives are impacted in a negative way. And so I am critical of a lot of systems and a lot of people who make choices that prioritize power or reputation over the people and the children specifically. So I want to have a discussion where we can keep an open mind and just think of these policies as not political, but think of them in a political vacuum where it doesn't matter which side this policy comes from. I will say too, I'm a little bit fiscally conservative. I believe in, spending our money wisely and conserving resources, but I do believe in spending money where we need to spend money. And that would always include the health and safety of children above anything else. So I've covered this before, where Kerr County Judge Rob Kelly noted that people did want a flood warning system, but his quote was, "The public reeled at the cost." And this was back in 2016 when they were talking about having the people of the Kerr County area pay for their own flood warning system. And it was going to cost around $1 million. And basically the public said, that seems like a lot of money, ... And nothing got done about it. So it says an examination of transcripts. By the way, this is from the Texas Tribune. An examination of transcripts since 2016 from Kerr County's governing body, the Commissioner's Court, offers a peek into a small Texas county paralyzed by two competing interests: to make one of the country's most dangerous region for flash flooding safer, and to heed near constant calls from constituents to reduce property taxes and government waste. Now, I understand both of those priorities. They are super important, but I'd rather pay a little more in my property taxes to have a warning system in place for one of the most dangerous flooding places in the country. And that's just me. I personally don't think spending money on a warning system is called government waste. So that's what I have to say about that. Then the article talks about the flood in 1987 that killed 10 teenagers. I want to point out that situation was very different than the situation that happened on July 4th. That situation involved a flooding emergency where campers, they thought, needed to be evacuated. And so they got into buses, they evacuated. As I've pointed out on my channel before, there are 3 or 4 critical points along Highway 39 where if they get flooded, you are trapped. And that's what happened in this situation. They evacuated, they got trapped, and 10 teenagers drowned. Lots of people were washed away, but lots of them were also rescued. I also want to point out, I sometimes forget to mention this, that in the early hours of July 4th, there were approximately 400 people rescued from the river. 135 of those were rescued by one company from the Coast Guard. So there were some amazing rescues and life-saving measures that were taking place during that time. I highly commend all of the first responders who were involved in those rescues. The loss of life could have been a lot worse, definitely. But this 1987 incident involved swiftwater rescues, but 10 teenagers were killed at that time. And so, of course, people started to talk about how we could make things a little bit safer. But not a lot of changes took place during that time. And a lot of the counties that surrounded Kerr County made some upgrades to their infrastructure. Comal County had moved to sirens and more modern flood warning systems. And then the one that we have, WB Thomas, the county's emergency management coordinator, was quoted as saying, the current that we have, it will give, all it does is a flashing light. I mean, that's all you get at river crossings or wherever they're located at. Well, that's not going to help anybody unless they're out there. And even if they're out there, the flashing light is not going to do much more good than just physically looking at the river, which you would be able to see from the crossing at that point. So this is the time that they implemented that code red alert about dangerous weather conditions. But WB Thomas urged the commissioner's court to strive for something more robust. Cell service along the headwaters of the Guadalupe near Hunt was pretty spotty in the western half of Kerr County, making a redundant system of alerts even more necessary, meaning one that wasn't tied to your cell phone. He said, quote, I think we need a system that can be operated or controlled by a centralized location where, whether it's the sheriff's communication personnel, myself, or whatever, and it's just a redundant system that will complement what we currently have. That was in 2016. By 2017, officials had sent off an application for a $731,000 grant to FEMA to help bring $976,000 worth of flood warning upgrades, including 10 high water detection systems without flashers, 20 gauges, possible outdoor sirens, and more. This is the $1 million that the county had said that's too much before, so they applied for a grant from FEMA to cover $730,000 of that nearly $1 million plan. And it said this system will be utilized for mass notification to citizens about high water levels and flooding conditions throughout Kerr County. Now I'm going to skip down just a little bit. In 2021, Kerr County was awarded a $10.2 million windfall from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, which Congress passed that same year to support local governments impacted by the pandemic. Cities and counties were given flexibility to use the money on a variety of expenses, including those related to storm-related infrastructure. Corpus Christi, for example, allocated $15 million of its ARPA funding to rehabilitate and or replace aging stormwater infrastructure. Now, everything up until this 2021 grant I've reported on before. This 2021 grant is new, and this is what is infuriating me today. So Kerr County was awarded $10.2 million. But they did not opt for ARPA to fund flood warning systems, despite commissioners discussing such projects nearly two dozen times since 2016. In fact, a survey sent to residents about ARPA spending showed that 42% of the 180 responses wanted to reject the $10 million bonus altogether, largely on political grounds. And this is where I'm going to say political dogma is going to interfere with human lives. If you just stick to your party line because that's what you've always done, and you just start parroting back all of the things that your particular political party has told you to parrot back without thinking about it, without thinking about the potential implications and consequences, that's how we end up with situations like this. Let me read a couple of quotes to you. Quote, I'm here to ask this court today to send this money back to the Biden administration, which I consider to be the most criminal, treasonous, communist government ever to hold the White House, one resident told commissioners in April 2022. That seems to me to be a little bit of a bias against an administration where you're going to say, we don't want your money because we don't like you. not thinking, oh, we could use this money to benefit the residents of this county and potentially save lives. Here's another one, quote, "We don't want to be bought by the federal government, thank you very much," another resident told commissioners. "We'd like the federal government to stay out of Kerr County and their money." Well, you need their money now. You need their help now. FEMA is there now. The federal government is helping now. Even Kelly, the Kerr County judge, remarked that this, quote, old law partner, U.S. Senator John Cornyn, had told him that if the county did not spend the money, it would go back to blue states. And this is a little bit manipulative, if you ask me. I want you to be able to see what I'm reading so you know I'm just not making it up, guys. This is from the Texas Tribune. You can find this article on their website. I will put it in the show notes so you can read it for yourself. But this is a little bit manipulative to say, hey, if you don't accept this money, it's going to go to the states that support the political parties that we don't like. And that seems really manipulative to me. Quote, "As far as where the money sits for next year or two, my old law partner, John Cornyn," this is the Kerr County judge speaking here, "My old law partner, John Cornyn, tells me if we send that back, it's going to New Jersey or it's going to New York or it's going to, God forbid, California." God forbid was added by me. But look, guys, why are we even having this kind of a comment? If we don't accept this money, it's going to go to some other state. That's a neutral statement. Why do we have to get weird about which state it goes to? These are human beings we're talking about. These are other human lives. They have other human problems too. They all have problems like we do, of homelessness, of children starving, all kinds of issues that we could address with this kind of money without getting political about it, with caring more about people than we do about money, than we do about politics. I don't understand this kind of rhetoric. It really bothers me. So let's plow ahead, shall we? He goes on to say, "And so I don't know if I'd rather be the custodian of the money until we decide what we have to do with it, rather than giving it back to the government to spend it on values that we in Kerr County don't agree with." I don't know when this Judge Kelly became the arbiter of what values we agree with, but I wish that we as a human population could just agree on the values of humanity, of taking care of each other, of making sure that we, put in systems that don't cost lives. When it was all said and done, the county approved $7 million in ARPA dollars, leaving $3 million on the table, on a public safety radio communication system for the Sheriff's Department and county fire services to meet the community's needs for the next 10 years, although earlier estimates put that contract at $5 million. Another $1 million went to the sheriff's employees in the form of stipends and raises, and just over $600,000 went towards additional county positions. A new walking path was also created with the ARPA money, the very walking path that I was walking on down at the river, by the way. Now, I have nothing against stipends and raises for law enforcement. In fact, I support that 100%. That was $1 million. I have nothing against upgrading communication systems for the Sheriff's Department and the fire services to meet needs for the next 10 years. $5 million well spent as far as I'm concerned. But what about the $3.2 million that was left on the table? Kerr County was offered a grant of $10.2 million, and they refused to take $3.2 million of that money. And if you'll remember, just a little farther up in the article, the early warning system that had audible sirens cost under $1 million. So what business did Kerr County officials have of leaving money, federal money, on the table out for what? Their pride? They could have used that money to fund that siren system that they'd been talking about since 2016. For 5 years, over 24 times, that audible warning system was brought up. And here they were gifted an opportunity by the federal government, and they rejected it because they didn't like the name of the person who was in office. It wasn't their guy. And so here we are in a situation where human lives have been lost, where children's lives have been lost, where 161 people are missing still because someone was prideful about accepting a grant from the federal government. Not someone, not just one someone, many someones. It was a vote, right? They had to vote on it to make a decision about that. But here it is. Here it is. Here is the smoking gun. If you were looking for one, here it is. Because regardless of the myopathy, the lack of foresight that residents might have had in raising their property taxes a little bit to put in a system that was necessary in a part of the country where the flash flooding is particularly bad, and they know this, and they've been through so many different instances. I was watching a news report earlier today that listed the number of flash flooding instances the top 10 counties in Texas have had. Hundreds of incidences. Some counties over 100 instances with no loss of life. The county with almost the fewest incidences and the highest loss of life, especially after July 4th, is Kerr County. So, I don't really know what to do with all this. It just makes me angry. I just want to put the information out there. Do with it what you will. But this kind of political dogma and this kind of pride and this kind of fear-mongering and manipulation that happens behind the scenes with government money really makes me angry. Because it just reminds me that, again, at the end of the day, it's not really about what's best for people. It's what's best for me, my individual personship, my thoughts, my beliefs. I think it is selfish, and I think it's myopic, and I think it's disgusting, frankly. All of us get angry as a part of the grieving process. And all of us, I think, have some tendency at least to want to place blame somewhere. I personally always want to be called out when I get something wrong. I want to be called out, especially where I have blind spots. And I always want to take into consideration the idea that I could be wrong about something and that someone else's idea could be right. So that's why I spend a lot more time listening than I do speaking, if you can actually believe that or not. Before I put together this show, these lives, I do so much research. I listen to so many different news sources. I have my favorites, but I also have the ones that I listen to because I disagree with them. I want to know where they have insights that I might have missed. So I'm never going to be first to the story. This article is 2 days old. I've sat on it because I want to sit and think about it while I'm shoveling mud in someone who's lost their house. I want to sit and think about it while I hand out supplies to people who've lost family members. I want to sit and think about it and make sure that I'm not just spouting off out of anger instead of trying to be careful and considerate about what I present on this channel. More than anything else, I want to correct misinformation when it's out there, and I've done that several times. But I'm going to put this article out here because I think this is what not enough people are talking about. And I've reserved the opportunity to get political on this channel because I believe it is so divisive. But I do want to say I think we've gotten to a point in our country where the unfortunate circumstance is that the only people that get elected to office are the people who are willing to step over other people to get there, because they're the ones who their narrative gets out there. People like me don't get elected to office because I would rather give someone else the opportunity if they're more qualified. I think that doesn't always happen with our elected officials, unfortunately. And I'm not saying they're all bad, but I'm saying you're much more likely to get into office if you're manipulative, because you're going to promise one thing, but then you're going to act in your own self-interest at the end of the day. Even if what you promised, you have to lay that aside. So I have hesitated before to point out a very glaring and obvious problem that's happening in our country right now. And I've done it because I've done it out of respect for the people who I love and respect, who vote differently than I do. I have not been critical of our top public leaders because I think that immediately polarizes people. So before I play this next clip, I'm just going to ask you to envision a scenario, because what we've been talking about for the last 10 or 15 minutes here is dogma, meaning something that we do because it's always been this way, or something that we think because we've always thought that way, the inability to change our mind, the inability to be flexible with our thinking, the inability to consider other people's points of view. So I want you to imagine a scenario. Imagine that you're in a relationship with someone and you ask them a question that forces them to potentially consider they may have done something wrong, or they may have failed to do something that they should have done. So just imagine that scenario. You're in a relationship. Think of your primary partner. Think, I have this uncomfortable thing. I need to bring something up. Ask them a question. Did you fail to do this thing? Or where did you fail? Is it possible that you made a mistake? Just throwing the possibility out there, not accusing them of anything, but saying, where did you make a mistake, or where were mistakes made? And let's imagine that your partner, the person you're in a relationship, responds by telling you that you're a bad person for asking that question. Your partner, the person that you care the most about. Would you still want to have a relationship with them if, when you asked if they could have possibly made a mistake, rather than saying, yeah, that's possible, I might have made a mistake, they call you a bad person? Imagine if you ask if they possibly could have made a mistake and they call you evil. How would you feel about that person? So I just want to say that when elected officials get asked the tough questions, when they get asked, is it possible you made a mistake, or where could you have made a mistake, or where could you have done things differently? I wish that our elected officials would say, I think that mistakes were made, and I don't have the exact answer, but we're going to look into it. Unfortunately, that's not always how elected officials respond. Sometimes they respond in a very toxic way. And unfortunately, that happened yesterday. And forgive me, guys, because, again, I thought I had this tab ready to go, and I don't. Really kind of takes the air out of it, doesn't it? Dang, I had the clip and everything. I'm so disappointed in myself right now. having to start all the way over. Talk amongst yourselves. I'm sure you are. I can't even see chat right now, guys. So okay, here we go. Sorry, guys.
Of this event, this horrible event, this horrible tragedy. Please, yes, go ahead, please.
Marissa Atmas here with CBS News Texas. Several families we've heard from are obviously upset because they say that those warnings, those alerts didn't go out in time, and they also say that people could have been saved. What do you say to those families?
Well, I think everyone did an incredible job under the circumstances. This was, I guess Christy said, a 1 in 500, 1 in 1,000 years. And I just have admiration for the job that everybody did. There was just admiration. The only a bad person would ask a question like that, to be honest with you. I don't know who you are, but only a very evil person would ask a question like that. I think this has been heroism. This has been incredible, really, the job you've all done. It's easy to sit back and say, oh, what could have happened here or there, you know. Maybe we could have done something differently. This was a thing that has never happened before. And nobody's ever seen anything. I've never seen anything like this. I've gone to some real bad ones.
So I just want to point out that whenever something like this happens, even if it's something that has never happened before, we always want to know how we can prevent it. We always want to know how we can make it better. We always want to know how we can change it. That's a good question to ask. It's a wonderful question to ask. It's an important question to ask. And in fact, it's our duty as American citizens to ask the elected officials who work for us, by the way, where things went wrong and how we can do things better. And especially when we're talking about the loss of lives, we have to ask these kinds of questions. And I would appreciate it if our elected officials would respond with kindness and empathy and understanding instead of calling someone that he obviously doesn't even know evil. It's not evil to ask questions. It's necessary. It's important. And I really am disappointed and angry and sad that this has been the response. And it's not the first time, by the way. When the mayor and the sheriff got asked the same question, their deflection was, it's time for us to focus on the rescue effort. Now, that was earlier on, and I sort of agreed with them a little bit. But I think we've gotten to that point. I do think that now is the time to ask the questions. I do think that now is the time to get those answers. And particularly in light of this article that I just shared with you, where we know that the opportunity to save lives was left on the table for, in my opinion, something that's not a good reason. So I just would like to leave this with you tonight, because what I care about more than anything else is supporting the people who have lost loved ones at this time, supporting all of the people who are grieving and suffering tonight, and wanting to understand how we can prevent this from happening in the future. I thought for a moment about ending this show by showing you some of the pictures of some of the people who have lost their lives, especially the children. But but I felt like that would be a little bit of exploitation, and I don't ever want to exploit victims. I just want to say we all know how it feels to lose somebody, and probably most of us know how it feels to lose somebody suddenly and unexpectedly in a preventable tragedy. And in my opinion, some of this tragedy at least was preventable. I do want to go back, though, just for a second and remind everybody that there were non-human factors involved in this tragedy. There were things that converged here that we couldn't have prevented. One of them was the fact that there were way more people on the river than there normally are because it was the 4th of July holiday. Another is that it happened in the middle of the night, and so many warnings went unheeded for that reason and that reason alone. And finally, we had a storm system that did what we didn't think it was going to do. And the National Weather Service did a great job of having extra staff on hand. And I believe that's why they did issue that thunderstorm warning and that flash flood warning when they did. I believe they stayed on top of it. I don't believe that anybody on that night, in that moment, acted in a way that was negligent in any way. I believe that this was brewing for years. I believe it started back in 2016 when people decided that they wanted lower property taxes instead of a warning system. And I think that the breakdowns continued to happen year after year after the fact. So again, it's not ever any one person's fault. It's not ever any one system's fault. Just like this storm had a number of factors that contributed to the deadliness of it, the failure to put in an audible warning system had a number of contributing factors that contributed to the failure of it. As always, I am going to be here for the victims. I'm going to be here for the survivors. I'm going to be here to continue to take the gift card money to the people who need it the most. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of your donations and your beautiful willingness to show up for these human beings that you don't even know. It's amazing, and it really does my heart good to see it. Thank you, Margie Z, for this, and thank you to everybody who's donated so far. And to all of those who can't donate right now, I feel you. I hear you. I understand. I know what it's like. Just know that I take your love and your care to those people, and they appreciate it just as much as the gift cards when you can't give. So I appreciate you for being here. Thank you so much for caring about Texas. And please share the episode with someone who needs to hear it, because that will help people to get the word that they need to hear so that the people can get the donations that they need. Again, I'm just going to share how people can help. The tcr.community.org is the fund that was set up specifically by the counties who are most affected. That's communityfoundation.net. That money goes directly to the 5 counties most affected. And tcr.communityos.org is where you can sign up to volunteer. And I believe some of those opportunities are beginning to be remote. In any case, you can sign up and create a profile there so that you can help out with things that need to be done in your own area. So thank you for being here. Thank you for keeping an open mind and for considering new ideas. And I hope that you take very good care of yourselves and hug your loved ones tight tonight, everybody. See you soon.